Stephen A. Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am the executive producer of First Take. You ever heard of Monica McNutt? You have now, because she's on First Take a lot.
Is at it again with another terrible, egotistical driven take. Basically, he's mad about this.
Who talks about the WNBA? Who talks about women? Who talk about women's sports more than First Take?
Stephen A., respectfully, with your platform, you could have been doing this 3 years ago if you wanted to.
Wow.
All right, we got to go to...
And he was blasted for it. Thus,
Shanae Ogwumike, absolutely wonderful, spectacular basketball analyst, etc., WNBA player in her own right. Ask her how it's been to be on First Take. How about Andrea Carter, who's a rising star in this business? How much do you think First Take helped that? What about Kimberly Martin? What about Molly Kiram herself?
he decided to dig a deeper hole, seeming to claim he is responsible for these great women having the careers they do. Now, let's be clear about a few things. First, she was a baller at Georgetown. The accolades are impressive, to say the least. #1 all-time in games, #2 in threes, #9 in steals, 16th in all-time points scored, 23rd in blocks, 25th in rebounds. This is the epitome of an all-around player. Thus, she was a two-time captain. WNBA.com's Dorothy J. Gentry did a piece on McNutt in 2023 discussing her rise from Hoya standout to a member of sports media. Prior to that, in 2021, the Washington Post's Scott Allen wrote an article on McNutt from her South Carolina UConn broadcast to her appearance on ESPN's Around the Horn. Allen would detail how McNutt worked at Prince George's Community Television as a multimedia journalist at News Channel 8 before her position was eliminated, of course. Then she joined the fledgling American Sports Network, an experience that was at times a hot mess, close quote. She'd be laid off again and consider getting out of the industry. Prior to ESPN, here's just a few of the things she did. She called games for Fox Sports 1, then the ACC network, then MSG network, co-hosts the podcast Buckets, Boards, and Blocks, then CBS Sports Network. I mean, the list goes on and on, okay? Kaz, one of the best and kindest in this cutthroat business, stood up for his co-worker, writing all Big East, won Emmys together, brought the Knicks content during the pandemic, voice of Knicks radio, and quite comfortably the best broadcast colleague I've ever had. Yes, I've heard of her. Have you? LOL. He also mentions Andrea Carter. Carter is another star that made a name for herself first and foremost. Through her playing career, played ball at the University of Tennessee with a plethora of awards to her name. The Athletic would write of her career. Carter's other broadcast assignments include working as a sideline reporter on SEC college football and an analyst and host on men's college basketball and the WNBA. Away from ESPN, she has worked as a studio analyst on Brooklyn Nets games. Last month, she received her most prominent assignment yet, working alongside Malika Andrews, Jay Billis, JJ Redick, Monica McNutt, Adrian Wojnarowski, and Bobby Marks as a member of ESPN's live NBA draft telecast. Awful Announcing added she joined the men's college basketball version of College Game Day this year, becoming the first full-time female panelist in that show's history. She also drew strong praise for her work on women's college basketball studio coverage with Elle Duncan and Shanae Ogwumike. Oh yeah, and she's also an amateur boxer.
How about Andrea Carter, who's a rising star in this business? How much do you think First Take helped that?
Then there's another name Smith mentioned, that being Shanae Ogwumike. Prior to her broadcasting career, she was the WNBA's Rookie of the Year and a two-time All-Star selection. People knew who she was. Many have seen her on ESPN's NBA Countdown, NBA Today, and SportsCenter. So when one hears claims of Smith essentially stating he made these women stars in the industry, there has to be a timeout called and the play to be under review. Furthermore, when McNutt said Smith could have talked about this stuff years ago on his show, here was his rebuttal.
When you're talking about I could do more, you're talking about First Take. And we've done more than most. And we could always do less.
No. Wrong way of framing this. Honestly, it gives off vibes like this.
You don't want to make an enemy out of me. And I'm looking right into the camera, and I'm going to say it again. You do not want to make an enemy out of me.
It's weird, But we should remember, this man has a history. And we start with what he said after the Ray Rice Janae Palmer incident went down.
But what I've tried to employ the female members of my family, some of who you all met and talked to and what have you, is that, again, and this is what I've done this all my life, let's make sure we don't do anything to provoke wrong actions. Domestic violence or or whatever the case may be, with men putting their hands on women is obviously a very real issue in our society. And I think that just talking about what guys shouldn't do, we got to also make sure that you can do your part to do whatever you can do to try to make sure it doesn't happen. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that we learn as much as we can about elements of provocation. Not that there's real provocation, but the elements of provocation, you got to make sure that you address it, because what we've got to do is do what we can to try to prevent the situations from happening in any way. And I don't think that's broached enough, is all I'm saying.
That's right. You heard it correctly. Smith said it is on women to not provoke men into committing DV. Michelle Beadle, then a coworker of Smith's, would write on Twitter, "So I was just forced to watch this morning's First Take. A, I'll never feel clean again. B, I'm now aware that I can provoke my own beating." She'd add, "I'm thinking about wearing a miniskirt this weekend. I'd hate to think what I'd be asking for by doing so at Stephen A. Smith. Hashtag don't provoke." In another tweet, Beadle wrote, "Violence isn't the victim's issue. It's the abuser. To insinuate otherwise is irresponsible and disgusting. Walk away." She'd also add, "I was in an abusive relationship once. I'm aware that men and women can both be the abuser. To spread a message that we not provoke is wrong." He wouldn't be done. Smith would go on a sexist rant saying men want a strong 7 and that 10s are too much maintenance. He'd say that an independent woman is a negative because it can reach a level where you, the man, start to feel dependent on your partner. Basically, he'd conclude, get yourself a woman who is just a little insecure about her own appearance, because that's the best way to keep her around. When he sat in on a SportsCenter segment to discuss the Women's World Cup match between Norway and Germany, a highlight of a free kick play that resulted in a goal, Smith said the competitors couldn't defend it because they, quote, didn't want to get their hair messed up. He also defended Floyd Mayweather Jr. in a puff piece after his DV case came to light. He'd also cut off co-host Carrie Champion to save his friend. When Ayesha Curry, the wife of Steph, tweeted a conspiracy about the NBA, Smith replied in typical Smith fashion, "You are the wife of Steph Curry," he said, addressing her on his show. "What you do is a reflection of him. What you do is a reflection on the organization he works for. You have to be mindful of that. You can't get caught up in your own individual emotions and having this zest to speak out to the point where it compromises your husband." Jen Yamamoto would write a Smith's diatribe telling a woman he later admitted he does not personally know what she should be doing and calling her classless while insisting that he has nothing but the utmost respect for her. Smith kept digging a hole and filling it with yet more sexist ranting. Another cringe-inducingly condescending word he used to describe Ayesha Curry, a bright and smart young woman and mother with her own cookbook, blog, and social media following, adorable. Smith would also use his platform to compare the physical appearances of Ayesha Curry and Savannah James, the wife of LeBron. Quote, "And I've got news for you. As beautiful as everyone wants to say Ayesha Curry is, and she is, Savannah is something special. I'm here to tell you something right now. Ain't a man alive, particularly a black man, that's going to look at LeBron James's wife and not say that woman ain't gorgeous. She's wonderful inside and out," Smith continued. "She sits there. She doesn't bring any attention to herself. She never tweets and goes out there and calls out the league and stuff like that, and nobody is more scrutinized than her husband. But yet, she thinks about how she represents him, and she doesn't do that." The rambling onslaught kept going. "She's quiet. She's unassuming. She doesn't bother," Smith said. "She stays in her lane and plays her position. She is LeBron's wife, and anything that she says or does can fall back on him. She is protective of her man." Skip Bayless. "I would say this to any lady who is the lady of a man. If you are doing that, you are thinking about yourself and not him, and that puts him in a compromising or potentially precarious position. And I believe you have an obligation to look out for your man like that." He'd also say on his show, "Ben Roethlisberger to me has never come across as a bad guy." Roethlisberger, one may recall, was suspended 4 games by the NFL in 2010 after he was accused of essay for a second time. Roethlisberger settled a suit relating to the case in 2008 and was not charged in either instance. So when I look at this in conclusion, I say there is a history here of having a sense of disrespect that has simply been brought to the forefront. And in my view, the time is coming. The time is coming. And maybe it is now, maybe it is in a few years, but it's happening. And we're all watching it transpire.